moving on in tools for Brisk, I want to introduce a new category, which I think is very relevant to many sugyas, and that is Maisa and Totzas HaMaisa, the action and the result of the action. Sometimes the halacha puts the emphasis on the process, on the action itself. And sometimes the emphasis is on the Totzah, on the effect, the impact, the result of the action. And this is going to be split up into many different parts. For example, we could talk about mitzvahs. When the Torah commands to do a mitzvah, is the emphasis on the asiyah, the maisa, or is the emphasis on getting to a certain state of being? The result of the maisa, that achievement, that goal. That's as far as chiyuvim are concerned. As far as isurim is concerned, once again, sometimes the Torah doesn't object, finds it intolerable to create such a situation, to have such a situation. More often than not, however, the Torah prohibits you to do the action, and the asiyah is prohibited. In chalosim, for example, in monetary law and so forth, you always have to differentiate between the act of the kinyan and the result of the act, the transfer of ownership, the chalos hakinyan. So again, in mitzvah we have the maisa mitzvah, the kiyuma mitzvah. We have the case of an isa, the maisa avera, and the impact of the avera and its result. And then we have in kinyanim in general, we have the maisa and the chalos hamaisa. So tonight, what we want to do is explore a number of sugyas that hopefully we can. Well, as we go through them, keep in mind that I'm always interested in the. This time I had you in mind, so you got the pages. Yeah, I'm always interested in the nafkaminas. A chakira, two sides of a coin, two definitions are only meaningful insofar as they give you a difference. Some sort of a relevant case which depends upon, the law of which depends upon this definition or that definition. And I think what we're going to see here, to some extent, are patterns that repeat themselves with regard to issues that will come up always, time and time after again, within the context of Maisa Mitzvah and Totzas Maisa Mitzvah. Now, take for example the father's obligation to circumcise his son. One could ask, where is the emphasis? Is it on the Maisa Mila, the act of circumcision, or no? The emphasis is on the goal, that the son, the ben, should be nimol, he should be gemalt, as we say in Yiddish. And the difference might be, for example, whether or not you can send a shliach for Mila. If the purpose and the goal of Mila is the fact that the son is circumcised, so I order a moel, I arrange it with him, he gets to do the Maisa Mila, and then I get the kiyuma mitzvah. I fulfill the mitzvah in its perfect form, simply because the child, I saw to it. You see, if we put the emphasis on the result, on the totzah, then in chiyuvim what it means is that my headache is not the process, it's not the action, but rather the end result. It could be possible that in some cases I could be totally passive, but if I achieve the end result, that itself might give me a kiyum ha-mitzvah. Although I have to admit that would be a little bit unusual. Usually we say that you had to have done something, whether it's mental, physical, or even verbal communication, so that you set up the ultimate goal of the mitzvah. So if I'm interested in the father's obligation vis-a-vis his son's milah, and I look at it as the totza'ah, so I want to see the son nimol, then I can certainly send the shliach. If, on the other hand, the emphasis here is on the act of milah, just like the Torah wants me to put on tefillin, and the Torah wants me to wear tzitzis, and the Torah wants me to eat matzah, and hear the shofar, and all these mitzvahs require an asiyah, so too in Mila, the Torah wants yimol v'sar alasa. You've got to get involved in the Maisa Mila. In such a case, I don't think shlichus would really do it, because in mitzvahs we don't find shlichus as a general rule. Now, please make note of this, because I think in those few cases where you do find shlichus for Mila, for a mitzvah, then I think what you're going to want to do, that's going to be the more attractive position, is to say that the mitzvah isn't a totzah. And since the asiyah is secondary, it's only a means to an end, therefore I can send someone else to do the job for me. So, for example, b'dikas chametz, I would postulate that the mitzvah is having a bias baduk. It's that, bless you, it's that state of being, that my house is chametz free. How do I get to that point is secondary. So if I send a shliach or I ask you to do it on my behalf, it's fine. Or, for example, putting up a mezuzah. One could argue that the mitzvah is not the act of putting up the mezuzah, but having the mezuzah. My house should be equipped with the mezuzah. In Ner Shebemigdash, I think we once discussed this in the past. Reb Chaim's chiddush is that the mitzvah balos chas haneros is not the act of kindling the menorah in the Migdash, but rather equipping the heichal with a ner doluk, with a menorah deluka. And that's how Reb Chaim explains the Rambam Shita, that if the menorah was outside the Azara, and a non-Kohen would light the menorah, and then the Kohen would bring the menorah inside and put it in the heichal where it's supposed to be, then you would have a full-fledged kiyum, a fulfillment of the mitzvah of Ner Shebemigdash. Because once again, the emphasis here is not on the process, but on the result of the process. What about Pirya Verivya? If you're familiar with the Minchas Chinuch at the very beginning, Mitzvah Aleph, he goes back and forth on this issue. Is the bia the mitzvah, or is it having a child? And take, for example, there's a whole sugya in Yevamos about a father and a son that were non-Jewish, and they underwent gerus, both the father and the son. Is there a kiyum mitzvah, Pirya Verivya? If you're going to say that it's the process, well, he was a guy at the time, he didn't have the mitzvah Pirya Verivya. It's not one of the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. If, on the other hand, the mitzvah is to have a son in the world, then it could be that through gerus he generates a situation, a matzav of a father with a son, and that itself might be enough for the kiyum mitzvah. If not for the kiyum of Pirya Verivya, maybe for a lesser kiyum of lo so bra, because insofar as it's his biological son, that might be sufficient. And this chakira about Pirya Verivya, whether it's the Maisa or the Totzas HaMaisa, whether it's the process of bringing a child into this world or having a child, is developed at great length by Rebbe Chanan Wasserman. And I like to mention him because he was a true blue brisker. He learned Baruch Chaim only for 2 years, and then he was with the Chafetz Chaim in Radin for many, many years, but until he opened his own yeshiva in Baranovich. But Rebbe Chana was very influenced, especially in this particular area. I would love to do a research and see how many of Rebbe Chana's chakiras fit into exactly this pattern. Maisa or Totzas HaMaisa. So this case of Pirya Verivya is very typical, I think, of Rebbe Chana. I'll mention another example. In the mitzvah of Kiddushin, the Torah says, Ki yikach ish isha. What is the emphasis? Is it on the Maisa Kiddushin, whether it's Kesef, Shtar, or Bia, or is it on the result of the Maisa, the Chalos HaIshus? For example, when a Chassan marries a Kala and he makes a bracha, Asher Kinshanu Etzosav Etzivanu, etc., Birchas Erisin, is that bracha on the Maisa, or is it on the result of the Maisa? Maybe the nafkamina would be when to make the bracha. There's a gigantic machlokus rishonim whether Birchas Erisin should be recited before he gives her the ring or after he gives her the ring. Our minhag is, of course, before he gives her the ring, because we hold that the mitzvah is the asiyah. But others say, you'll find it in the Ravid, in the Rosh Ksubis, and others say that the Ikar mitzvah is the chalos, is the result of the act. Now they're husband and wife, the chalos issues. This new status that's created through the process, that's the Ikar. And therefore the bracha should be made on that, even after the Maisa Kiddush. Shifting over for a moment to concepts that go beyond mitzvahs. Let's take mazik. Now, I can cause a hezek without doing an action. And insofar as the chiyuv mazik is for the result of the action, the damage that I caused to someone, then even if the maisa itself, the act through which I set up this hezek, is lacking. So, for example, the classical case would be bar. I dig a bar and you fall into the bar, or your animal falls into the bar, right? So I didn't directly push you into the bar. So if you need a Maisa Hezek, we have to talk about whether the Asiyas Habar, the Kriyas Habar, digging the bar is itself called a setting up a Maisa Hezek. But if on the other hand I argue that it's the final result that the emphasis is on, I'm chayiv not for creating the bar, but I'm chayiv for tripping you up, meaning setting up a situation where you're in danger of falling in, then I don't have to emphasize the Asiyas Habar. And the classical examples is Sugi Bava Kama. Let's say I dig a pit in my backyard. That's not called Asiyas Hamazik. Who asked you to go into my backyard and with your animal and it falls into my bar? You, the Afsad Rashi, he caused the hezek to himself. But if he goes ahead and he's mafkir his chotzer, and now basically he attaches his private backyard to the public thoroughfare, now we have a situation of a bar. He did nothing to protect the public from damage. On the one hand, to say that he's chayav, he should be paying damages because of the asiyas habar, very difficult to say that. Where did he create the bar? In his own backyard. That's perfectly legit. But now that through the act of hefker, without protecting others from the bar, he tripped them up, then although the maisa asiyas hezek is lacking, but the final result is the same. And basically, I want you to note this because I tell you these are great tools. Whenever you see the concept of maisa and grama, whenever you see the concept of causing something indirectly, you know that you're shifting the emphasis from the action to the result of the action. So, for example, the famous sugyan chulin of bidka demaya. You have water that's rushing, but it's being held back by a dam, and then you remove the dam, and the rush continues. And now, as a result of these rapids, the water pressure, the energy force, you could almost do anything. You could kill somebody, and now you have to question Ritzicha, and you can even do Shchita. The Gemara has a case where he sets up, and this is all relevant to modern technology, where you can press a button, and an automated machine will do everything for you. That's not an action, but you cause the result. So, Netilas Yadayim. Do I need a Maisa Netilas Yadayim, of pouring the water on my hands? Or is it enough that my Yadayim are Yadayim Netulos? They've been washed. So if I set up the water system, a spigot, I remember in Sahel we used to always have these issues all the time. We had these issues out in the field. Can you use the spigot for Netilas Yadayim? You didn't always have a cup with you, and very often, you know what they did? They took a can, tzimsenet of, zaitim, of olives or something, and they opened it up, got rid of all the zaitim, and that's what they used for Netilas Yadayim. Big shilas on them. But again, when you're in Sahel, you have to be makil a little bit. But a lot of this has to do with the issue of what is the mitzvah of Netilas Yadayim? How do I remove Netilas Yadayim? In mikvah, for example, mikvahs, is it important for me to jump into the mikvah? Or is it enough if I find myself in the water of the mikvah? Is the emphasis on the action or the result of the action? Now, in the pages that you have in front of you, from this Sefer on Lumdis by Rav Yitzchak Adler, he discusses the following mitzvahs. I think the first one on your list will be the mitzvah of tashbisu, correct? So let's give a little bit of background, an overview of what's going on here. There are a number of mitzvahs, as we said at the outset, where the question becomes, and we should automatically plug it in. We should train ourselves to use these tools automatically. Ask yourself, what's the emphasis, what's the crucial part of the mitzvah? Is it the action or the result of the action? So just to give you an overview, before we go through the specifics of tashbisu, etc., in the case of ma'akeh, he's going to discuss. If you have a roof, and the roof is dangerous, it's exposed, doesn't have a fence around it, you're obligated, a mitzvah d'oraisa, to put up a fence. Is it the act of putting up the fence that's the emphasis, or is it the having a roof that's walled, that's fenced, that's secure, that's protected? And one of the differences is going to be that if it's the emphasis on the action, you have to do it yourself, or perhaps through a shliach. If the emphasis on seeing to it that your your roof is well protected and secure, then I don't even have to do it myself, not even through shliach. Number two, the case of basar b'cholov. You're not allowed to cook meat and milk together. Is it the process or the result of the process? For example, I may be able to end up with the same identical entity of basar b'cholov without a bishul. So if the Torah is using bishul as a what word do I want to use? As a category, it's not the specific action, but it's referring. It's an abstract concept, bishul, of creating basar b'cholov. Then I might be chayav for creating basar b'cholov even without an action. Okay. What other example did I want to give you? And then we'll get into Tashbisu. Yeah, we're going to talk about Hadlokas Ner Shabbos. Now, what's the purpose, the goal of Hadlokas Ner Shabbos? Anybody? Don't all answer at once because I can't
Have
hear.
light for Shabbos?
Yeah, what's that called? Do you know what that's called? Shalom Bayis. Shalom Bayis. Not Shalom Bayis in the sense of, there may be elements of that too, but we're not talking about family, husband and wife relationship. Shalom Bayis means that there should be harmony. I can see where I'm going. I don't walk into a wall or into a table if it's pitch black. So what would you say? Is the mitzvah the act of hadlaka? In Ner Chanukah we say lahadlik Ner Shal Chanukah. But in the case of Ner Shabbos, logically one could argue that we don't care about the mitzvah. The act is secondary. It's a means to an end. The goal of the mitzvah is clearly to have light in the house, to illuminate the house. And therefore, if I could illuminate the house through a way, some sort of method where I can't get credit for the ma'aseh hadlaka, the act of lighting was not a mitzvah per se. Let's say, for example, I lit these candles, gigantic candles, or maybe even electric lights, at the beginning of the week. If you could imagine a candle that lasts for a full week. So what do I have to do on Erev Shabbos? Do I have to put them out and light them again? That seems like an exercise in futility. But again, it all depends. If the mitzvah was formulated as an act, then Enokinami, I should have to put it out and put it on again. Again, I have to put it out because otherwise there's no point to lighting a candle. It's already lit. The place is illuminated. But if, on the other hand, it's the Totzas HaMaisa, it's the result that's the emphasis, then maybe we could drop the requirement of a Maisa. And so if you lit it before the Shas Chiyuv, which normally would be meaningless, you can fulfill it. In Netilas Lulav, there's a halacha of ulakachtem. What is ulakachtem? Is ulakachtem a mice of taking it into my hands, or is ulakachtem having the lulav in my hands? And once again, the difference is going to be if I took up the lulav in such a way that I couldn't fulfill the mitzvah. Let's say before daybreak. So now, after Alos HaShachar, after Zricha, I have the lulav in my hand. Is that called a lakicha? Is the situation of having the lulav enough to be considered a lakicha? Or, for example, let's say I don't own the lulav, and on the first day I need ownership. If you give me a hakna, you take your lulav and you transfer it over to me, the minute it came into my hands, it wasn't mine until after I took it into my hands. Do I have to put it down for a new lakicha? Or do I say, no, it's enough that I have a lulav that's mine in my hands? Clearly, in the case of matzah, there's nothing to talk about. The mitzvah of matzah is the achila. And on the flip side of it, in macholas asuros, the aveira is violated through a maisa, through an act of achila. We could say the same thing for gili arayos, that the violation of all these aveiros in this area would be the maisa bia, the maisa erva. Now let's talk a little about tashbisu. The mitzvah is to get rid of your chametz. In fact, the flip side of tashbisu, meaning the prohibition against owning or possessing chametz, is called what? Balira Bayimotzi, 2 lavim. So you've got, in the case of possessing chametz, you got slapped with 2 lavim and an essay. Now, what is the nature of this essay? Is the Torah telling us destroy the chametz? Is the act of destroying the chametz the main emphasis? Or not having chametz? And then nafkamina would be, let's say I have no chametz in my possession. Should I go out and buy a piece of chametz in order to destroy it? It sounds a little silly. But if I postulate that the mitzvah is the asiyah, the act of hashbasas chametz, for example, would it make any difference in your minds which way, in what method, I'll give you 10 different possibilities, you get rid of your chametz? You could burn your chametz, you can flush it down the toilet, you can throw it up in the air, you can crush it into small bits. Correct? And if you're imaginative, you'll come up with a whole bunch of others. Does anybody know by chance which Tana in the Mishnah actually specifies a particular method of destroying chametz? That method and only that method is acceptable. Did you learn a little psachim? Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ein b'yor chametz ella." Yes. Straightforward, correct? You have to burn it. Now, if the totzaas hamaisa is the mitzvah of tashbisu, why would Rabbi Yehuda specify a particular method of destroying it? For example, we have in nosar, if you leave over kachim beyond its allotment, its time allotment, instead of bringing it on the mizbeach, then it becomes nosar. And the Torah says, now you have a mitzvah. That mitzvah requires an act. What is that act? Sreifa, ba'esh tisrofu. Rabbi Yehuda applies the same logic to chametz. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says there's only one method that's acceptable for hashbasas chametz, and that is sreifa. But on the other hand, the Chachamim say hashbasas b'chol davar. Any way you want to get rid of it, as long as you get rid of it. I was always wondering what would be, according to Chacham, if I took a long flight to the moon and I left all my chametz here on earth. Maybe that itself would be a mitzvah of tashbisu, because I no longer have access to my chametz. Well, maybe I still own it. In the case of tashbisu, we're going to have a number of issues and controversies beyond this controversy that we mentioned between Rabbi Yehuda and Chacham, whether you have to get rid of it by burning it or any method is acceptable. And all these controversies, I think, boil down to one issue, and that is, what is the nature of the mitzvah of tashbisu? Is it the act of destroying it, or is it the result of the act that I am without possession of chametz? For example, we know that bal yirah bal yimotzei, that means the prohibition against owning chametz, is called a lav she'ein bo ma'aseh. Do you want to note that? A lav she'ein bo ma'aseh. Maybe somebody could even, I don't know if we have any possibility of using this blackboard, but anyway, just write down in your notebooks, lav she'ein bo ma'aseh. Now, there may be another reason, a second reason why Bal Yorah Bal Yimotzei would not generate malchus. In addition to the fact that it's a lav she'ein bo maisa, and you only get malchus if you violate a lav through a maisa, it also comes under the category of excellent lav hanitak le'esei, which means a lav that you have to rectify by doing an essay. So if you steal something, you have to return it. That makes it a lav hanitak li'esei. And if you leave nosar, you have to burn it. And if you leave chametz in your possession, you violate Bal Yorah Bal Yimotzei, you have to destroy it. Therefore, not only is the lav of Bal Yorah Bal Yimotzei a lav she'ein bo ma'aseh, at the same time, there's another technical reason why there's no malchus in the case of Bal Yorah Bal Yimotzei, because it's a lav hanitak le'esei. It's a lav where the Torah tells you to rectify, fix up what you did. You messed up, now fix it up with an essay. And the Torah commands me how to do that. The Rambam at the beginning of Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah says the following, that if somebody buys chametz on Pesach, or he takes flour, adds water, and he bakes it in an oven, and he makes a piece of bread on Pesach, the Rambam says you get malchus. Why? Because it's a lav sheyesh bo ma'aseh. Now you did an action to violate the lav of Bal Yorah B'Yimotzeh. Anybody have a question on the Rambam? Oh, what about lav anita glese? If the Rambam would have said a theoretical point, okay, it now became a lav sheyesh bo ma'aseh, but he didn't commit himself that now you get malchus, fine, that we accept. But the Rambam committed himself that under that circumstance, once you obviated the problem of lav shein bo ma'aseh, and now you have a ma'aseh, you bought the chametz, says the Rambam, you get malchus. And the question is why? What about lav anita glese?
What was that again? Sorry.
Lav hanita klese. Again, I apologize that I don't have use of a blackboard here. We really should. Lav hanita klese. You want me to spell that for you?
Sure.
Good. Lav is of course lamed aleph vav. It always is, always was, always will be. And hanitak is hey nun yud. 1 second. Kuf. No, I blew it. Hey nun yud taf kuf. Hanitak le ese lamed ayin sin. Hey, which means the lav lends itself to rectification. And we've discussed this in the past about lav anita klese. You remember that? The sugya of bitlo, v'lo bitlo, kimo, kimo. There we talk about the complex halacha, because the question is whether you have to not only violate the lav, but then you have to get rid of the essay. That's called bitlo, v'lo bitlo. And then the question is when you give the asra, and we discussed this at great length. That's not relevant to us tonight.
So he made this matzah during Passover. He made this chametz. So why did he violate this thing of having something that has to be rectified?
Because the Torah now says destroy the chametz, tashmisu.
Yes.
So the Torah is giving you an essay to get up and destroy it.
Right.
So the Rambam, by saying that you get malchus for buying chametz on Pesach, is dropping the ball on lav hanita klese. And we're going to have to somehow explain why the mitzvah of tashbisu is not an essay to be menatek the lav. So Reb Chaim Brisker is very famous for saying that whether or not Bal Yorah B'Yimotzeh is a lav hanita klese depends upon how you define the essay. Is the essay just a repetition of the lav, which is called a lav haba mechal essay, or otherwise known as an iser essay? Or is it an assay b'kuva assay, which tells you to get up and do a mitzvah? And that mitzvah has a ma'aseh mitzvah to it. In order to arrive at the conclusion that it's a lav hanita glese, what I need is a kuva assay. For example, I stole something, I have to return it to you. That act of hashava is menatek the lav. It rectifies, it corrects the lav. Is the Torah telling me tashbisu to get up and destroy it? If so, then it's a lav hanita glese. Apparently the Rambam doesn't hold that. Had the Rambam passing like Rabbi Yehuda in Bir Chametz El Sreifa, and the Torah specifies exactly how you have to get rid of your chametz, it means that the Torah puts the emphasis on an action, then the mitzvah of tashbisu becomes a nituk on the lav. And there could never be malchus, and never ever for Bal Yorah B'Yimotzeh. The Ram took a different approach. He passed not like Rabbi Yehuda, Ein Bir Chametz El Sreifa. The Ram says hashbasasim chol davar. Ketzad mitzvahs hashbasa, the Ram says in Perek Beis Milchus, and he gives you all the options. Because there's no mitzvah to destroy your chametz. The mitzvah is not to have chametz in your possession. And if you have chametz in your possession, heaven forbid, you violated the essay, the Isur of Tashbisu. Is Mamela according to the Rambam, it's crystal clear that Lav Hanita Klese has no application. Because the Torah is doing nothing more than repeating the Lav, albeit in the form of an essay. That's not a Lav Hanita Klese. A Lav Hanita Klese says you violated the Lav, here's how you rectify it. That's not what Tashbisu is all about. Tashbisu doesn't require an Asiyah. It's the state of being, having no chametz. And therefore, again, I come back to my original question. If you don't have any chametz in your possession, would there be any point, according to the Rambam, to go out and buy chametz in order to destroy it? No, there's no active destruction. You don't go to the mikveh and say, Hineni muchenu mezuma l'kayim mitzvah seichel, destroying the chametz. That's not what it's all about. The Torah says, do not have chametz in your possession. Now, if you take a look on your page, I want to point out to you number Gimel, which is, I think, on your page Kuf Chav Hey. And this is a quote from the Minchas Chinuch. Gam im ha-mitzvah v'kum v'asei lo yotza ela im kein kiyem ha-mitzvah bizmano. Chatzos yom yudalet. Hachinami, therefore he says, and I underline those words, Kodem chatzosim hishbis lo kiyem ha-mitzvah. He says, the Minchas Chinuch, that if there's an active element, a kum v'asei, and the emphasis on tashbisu is that kum v'asei, the action of destroying the chametz, then you'd have to destroy the chametz after the mitzvah sets in. And the mitzvah is only engendered midday on Erev Pesach. But before that, you can destroy your chametz. You'll protect yourself from Bayir Matzah, but you would not have fulfilled the mitzvah of tashbisu. Because right now, at this point, the Minchas Chinuch is presenting the approach that the mitzvah of tashbisu requires an asiyah. Aval ima mitzvah b'shevi al taseh, or the way Reb Chaim said it, it's an isur aseh of not having chametz in your possession. Kein ha'ikar delo yelo chametz. Ukshemagia azman, it means when the time for the prohibition of chametz sets in, he doesn't have any chametz. That's how he fulfills the mitzvah of tashbisu. And perhaps there might be another nafkamina as far as sending a guy. What would you say? So this is machlokas between the Magen Avraham and Rabbi Kiva. What happens if you ask a non-Jew to destroy your chametz? How would you make it totally in this hakir?
If you need an asiyah, then you can't have a guy as a shliach.
Correct. A guy is not a shliach. So even if you would appoint a guy as a shliach, his maisa is not your maisa. So what would be the svara of the Magen Avraham that you could send a guy to destroy your chametz? The mitzvah itself is not the asiyah, but being chametz free, achieving that state of not having chametz in your possession. Is mamela, you can send a guy. So I want you to be keenly aware of the fact that a pivotal question about mitzvahs, in terms of whether the emphasis is on the asiyah or on the totzah, will be good. Can you send an on-Jew as your representative? If you need the Torah Shlichus, the agency law, he can't be your agent. If you need a Maisa, and you have to apply the principle of Shlucho Shalom the Kemos, the Maisa Shlichus, like the Maisa of the Mishalech, that parsha was not given. It's Atem Gamatem. Ma Atem B'nei Bris, Av Shluchachem B'nei Bris, but a guy is excluded. If on the other hand, all I need is to get to a certain point, I have to create that state of being chametz free, and as we said over and over again, the method through which I achieve that goal is secondary, and it's irrelevant. I mean, what's the difference between throwing my chametz up to the air and having the wind blow it away, and giving my chametz over to a guy and let him destroy it for me? It's perfectly acceptable. Once again, in the Rambam's perspective, the way Reb Chaim taught us in the Rambam, that tashbisu is an isur aseh, then certainly sending your chametz with a guy would be perfectly acceptable. Now, our minhag is to be machmer and try to burn the chametz. It's a beautiful minhag, and it reflects the shita from Yehuda, but you should know that it's only a minhag. Mikar din, you don't have to burn your chametz. In fact, I'm not even sure if some people don't really do a good job when they burn their chametz. They don't burn it thoroughly. There's other issues, if you put lighter food, there are different issues that could come up. But when you bring your children out there to destroy the chametz, the kids like that. They always like bonfires, right? So you got to be very careful, because if you assume that the mitzvah is the state of being, then fine. Let the child throw the chametz, the bag, into the fire. But if you require a maisa, and you want to gain that element, that dimension of a maisa mitzvah tashbisu, then I don't know if you could allow your son to do it, even if he's a mature kid of 8 years old or 10 years old. You better do it yourself. And now this is all leading up to the case of makeh. And the issue is going to be putting a fence up around my roof. Can I send a guy to do so? So if you take a look here on page Kuf Chaf Hey, on the left side of your page, the Minchas Chinuch raises the possibility that the mitzvah is building the makeh, either himself or through a shliach. If the mitzvah equals b'niyas hamakeh, then clearly ein hanochri yochel livnos hamakeh b'shvil Yisrael. However, there's another possibility, and that's the Machne Ephraim. If you'll see at the bottom of page Kuf Chav Hey, the Machne Ephraim says, "Afilu nochri yochel livnos makeh," because we don't need b'niyah. It's not the act of constructing the makeh. And therefore you don't need a shliach, and even a guy would be sufficient. And on page Kuf Chavav, he has a whole long piece here in which he compares it to Tvilas Kalim, which means we have to take new Kalim that are purchased from a guy and we have to put them into the mikvah. And he has a Rashba here that says you can send the guy to the mikvah, let him put it in. That's not our minhag. We really insist that a Jew put it into the mikvah, because we hold that in Tvilas Kalim it's the act of Tvilah that generates the mitzvah. But clearly, according to the Machne Ephraim, in the case of makeh, it's not the act of putting up the makeh that's the mitzvah. The emphasis is on having the makeh. And therefore you can send a guy. The Machne Ephraim raises one other possibility, which is fascinating. It could have tremendous repercussions in all of halacha, that if you hire a guy and you pay him for the job, which makes him into a sachir, then there may be halacha of yad hasachir, yad hapoel ki yad balabais. So that even if I require the asiyah, if I'm paying the guy to do it, under certain circumstances, certain conditions, that might be considered qualified as an asiyah. So that's fascinating, because that raises the possibility that if I hire a company to put up a makeh around my roof, even though the company is it's not a Jewish company per se, the workers and the employees are not Jewish, I might fulfill the mitzvah even if I grant you that you require an asiyah. The building of the makeh is the mitzvah. But yad poel ki yad balabais. Well, we can talk about that later, because in the shir that I want to give later on tonight, I really want to touch on this whole concept of yad poel ki yad balabais. And now we get to the case of Ner Shabbos. This you'll find on page Kuf Chav Vav on the left side of your page. And again, I apologize if part of it got cut off, but I think you could read most of it. Am I right? So there's a concept called Tosefes Shabbos. And clearly, once a person lights Shabbos candles, he has accepted upon himself, or she has accepted upon herself, Tosefes Shabbos. I don't know if a Tanai works, and she could say, well, I'm not ready for Shabbos yet. That's an issue in the poskim. But even Tosefes Shabbos has its limitations. You can't get up on a Tuesday night and say, well, I'm a kabbalah myself Shabbos. That's meaningless. You can do it from Plag on Mincha, late on Friday afternoon, before the sun sets, but not on a Tuesday. So therefore the question is, what if I light the candles for Shabbos on Tuesday? And as I said before, the gigantic candles. So this is a business in Tosfos. Tosfos is in Shabbos Chaf Heyom and Beis, and he quotes a shita of Rabbeinu Tam, which I think I underlined. I hope you have that underlined. Nirel Rabbeinu Tam Shem Hoya Ner Mudlak V'Omed if the candles for Shabbos were already lit, then tzarech lechabosam ulachzar v'lahadlik. What does Rabbeinu Tam mean when he says that you have to extinguish them and rekindle them? What definition of the mitzvah of Ner Shabbos is he operating with? Maisa. But if you look earlier in that same Tosfos, and I think it's a shita of, if I'm not mistaken, the Bahag, but don't quote me on that. Im hoysa mudlekes v'omedes lo hoyet tzarech lechabosa v'lachzar uladlika v'lo lahadlik acheres. That according to this opinion, which Tosfos in Shabbos and Daf Kaf Beis doesn't, apparently it's an anonymous opinion, he doesn't identify him as far as I can tell, but I think it might be the Bahag Shita. It's enough that you have candles lit. There's no need to put them out because they were lit early in the week and then rekindle them. Because the mitzvah is Oneg Shabbos, and Shalom Bayis, all this which he can fulfill if the candles are lit. You don't have to light them. So the mitzvah is not the hadlaka in this case, but the ner dolok, the illumination. Therefore, even if it was illuminated earlier, before the mitzvah of hadlaka set in, you have the mitzvah. And interesting, if you read the paragraph carefully, he compares it to the case of kisui hadam. Here's an interesting case. After you shech the bird, you have to cover its blood. What happens if the wind blows the earth in such a way that it covers the blood? So the question arises in the Gemara in Chulin, in Kisah Ruach Potamil Chasosa. It seems that in such a case he doesn't have to dig up the blood and recover it, right? And cover it again, I mean to say, not recover. He doesn't have to recover it and recover it. But what does that mean? Does that mean he fulfilled the mitzvah, or does that mean that he's potter for the mitzvah? You see, if we say that the mitzvah is the asiyah, the Maisa Kisui, that he didn't do. The Ruach took care of it for him. And therefore, he doesn't have the Schar Mitzvah b'yadav. On the other hand, he's potter for the mitzvah because there's no dam to cover. If on the other hand I postulate that the mitzvah is not the act of Kisui, but having the dam mechusa, then what difference does it make whether he covered it or the Ruach covered it? In both. So the nafkamina is going to be, if let's say he wants to do the mitzvah again, right? If he, let's say, in kisar ruach patul chasos afilu hachi kishemachase tzarich levarich, would it be sensible if he exposed it and then covered it again and made a brach on that, or nolad mohu? Oh, you see here, I think this touches on what we discussed before. What's the mitzvah of milah? Is it the act of milah or being mohu? So the nafkamina, he says, is nolad mahul. You were born without a milah, without an arla, but there's something that substitutes for milah in a case where there's no arla. Anybody know what that's called? Hatafas tam bris. So the question is, nolad mahul, do you need hatafas tam bris? And the answer is yes, because the mitzvah is the maisa milah. Therefore, by this token, says Rabbeinu Tam, we should apply the same logic to the case of hadlakas ner Shabbos, and even if you have a house that's lit, you have candles that were lit early in the week, put them out and light them again. Another nafkamina is what we discussed before. What about sending a guy? Can I appoint a guy to light the candles on my behalf for Shabbos? Again, if the mitzvah is the act of hadlaka, he's not a shliach, and therefore his hadlaka doesn't relate to me. If on the other hand the mitzvah is having the ner doluk, it's the totzas hamaisa, then I can do it through a guy. Now let's see, he quotes here on page Kuf Chaf Zayin, number Beis on the right side, a Magen Avram. The Magen Avram says, Tomar li akum lahadlik. Interesting. We said before that the Magen Avram in Tashbisu says you can send a guy. And here, in the case of Ner Shabbos, you can send a guy. I don't know if there's any connection between the two, but the Magen Avram seems to be the dogel b'shitas totzas ha'maisa. Now we mentioned that in the case of Tashbisu, Rabbi Kivega had qualms about it. Here we're going to see that Rabbi Kivega has qualms about sending a guy to light the Shabbos candles. Once again, maybe Rabbi Kivega is the Dogel B'Shitas Maisa HaMitzvah. And therefore Rabbi Kivega says, if you need a Maisa Adlaka, guy is not a Shliach. Now, what's important here, and this is again is going to be a what's it called when you have a threshold into something? What word do they use? A
Gateway?
Segue.
A segue? Yeah, this is going to be a segue into the next piece. Take a look at number Daled, which is on the left side of your page. He says, the Rambam holds in Hilchos Shabbos, Perek Hey Halacha Aleph, that the Nusach HaBracha for Ner Shabbos is Lahadlik Ner Shel Shabbos. The Gra in Hilchos Shabbos Reish Samach Gimel has a different source. He based himself on the Yerushalmi that the bracha is Al Hadlakas Ner Shabbos. Now I'm going to leave this for a minute hanging in the air. We'll come right back to it. Why should the bracha be either like the Rambam would have it Lahadlik or like the Gaon would have it Al Hadlakas Ner? What's that all about? And I think we'll have more clarification on that when we see, in general, with regard to all mitzvos, what is the rule that governs the Nusach HaBracha. Should it be with an Al or with a Lit? And we've discussed this in the past. So if you look at the bottom of Kuf Chav Zayin, the first rule is that if you're doing the mitzvah yourself, you're performing it without a shliach but personally, then the bracha is with a Lamed. The second klal, which you'll see on page Kuf Chav Ches, is that if you're making the bracha after the mitzvah, then the bracha takes on Al. It shifts from Lamed to an Al. And therefore the Rambam has in the case of Netilas Lulav, which he believes you were Yotze already Nikar Achiv once you picked it up, and then you make the bracha, because you can't make the bracha when it's lying on the table. That's too early. So the Rambam says the bracha therefore is after the Netila, after the mitzvah was fulfilled. Then the bracha has to be with an Al. And the third rule is that if you're making a bracha on a reshus, that's not a chova. For example, the Netilas Yadayim is not an absolute obligation. Shchita is not an absolute obligation. Then the bracha shifts from a lav to an al. If a shliach fulfills the mitzvah, then the nusach would probably shift from a lav to an al. So what underlies all these rules? What is the lamed appropriate for, and what is the al indicative of?
Lamed is a seal.
Correct. The lamed is lasos, lisatef betzitzis, lehaniach tefillin, lahadlik ner shel Shabbos. We'll come back to the Rambam's nusach, because the Rambam holds that apparently the mitzvah of Shabbos is the act of hadlaka, similar to the mitzvah of lahadlik ner Chanukah, dissimilar to the mitzvah of Ner Shebemikdash, which the Rambam says you could be Yotze if the Zar lights it outside the Azara, and the Kohen brings the Ner into the Azara. That is enough of mitzvah, says Rav Chaim, because the mitzvah is Baloscha, that the Ner should go up, that the Heichel should be equipped with the Ner. But not so in the case of Ner Shabbos Ner. So that's the bracha with a lamed, and you'll see it over and over again. I'll be right with you. That the lamed is indicative of what? Of the asiyah, of the action. The flip side of it, the al, is indicative of the totzas hamayis. For example, we mentioned the case of lahadlik ner Shabbos, that according to the Gaon, based on the Yerushalmi, the appropriate nusach should be al hadlakas ner Shabbos, because in Shabbos the ikar is lighting up the house. It's the totzas hamayis. Then we had the klal that if a shliach is doing it, then when he performs the mitzvah, he doesn't do it on the asiyah. He's just a means of creating the end result. Therefore, he makes a bracha with an al. If you've already implemented the ma'isa, like in the case of mida'ag bei nafik bei, you've taken the lulav, then the bracha is going to be with an al, because it's not on the ma'isa mitzvah, but on the totzah samais, the kiyuma mitzvah. And finally, a mitzvah for shus, where the mitzvah by definition is not in the asiyah, but in the totzas ha'maisa, is then the bracha shifts from a lamed to an al. Yes, David, what was your question?
Tzitzit.
Lihisatef bat tzitzit. Why? Because the act of wrapping yourself, of levisha, is the mitzvah. In other words, if the talus would fall out from Shemayim onto your body and cover you, if a guy would put the talus over you, you would forfeit the mitzvah, because the mitzvah is lisate. Now, Rabbosai, as we come to the conclusion of this discussion, I want to, again, what was the word, a hedgeway? A sedgeway?
Segue.
A segue, sorry, segue, I have to write that down. The segue here into another tool for Brisk, which is called Tzvei Dinim. I mean, that's what Reb Chaim is world famous for, 2 dimensions, 2 aspects, 2 kiyumim, 2 chiyuvim, 2 isurim, etc., 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 is absolutely appropriate once we have this structure. Because what we're going to suggest is that in many cases, in many mitzvahs, you have a twofold mitzvah. On the one hand, it's the Maisa mitzvah. On the other hand, it's the result of the Maisa. Now, David, you mentioned the case of tzitzis. And I would submit to you that tzitzis has both dimensions to it. On the one hand, it's the Maisa of lehisatev, similar to tefillin, the Maisa of hanochas tefillin. But in addition, you've got the gavra, the guf ha'adam, me'utar v'tefillin, me'utar v'talis. And therefore, if let's say in the middle of the day, you remind yourself, oh, I didn't make a bracha, and you're already wrapped in the talis, you could make the bracha. Not on the asiyah with a lamid, but at least on the situation of being me'utaf v'talis, which is an ongoing, continuous situation, a state of being, and the bracha would shift to an al. Clear? Good. So I think we covered a great deal tonight, and the Mitzvah Hashem will continue next week.